Manuel país que me recibió de brazos abiertos. Soy muito grato, muito obrigado. Thank you. That's all my Portuguese. But it's a beautiful language. And I think, English is my fourth language, so there is room for Portuguese. Still, thank you for taking the time this evening. It's such a pleasure and honor to me to know Hamilton and Fernanda and all of you who have had a chance to see you again coming from faraway places. I feel very grateful to you. Okay. The topic is very interesting. Leadership and trends in education, real estate education, and what real estate education implies. I have a few bullet points which I write, but this topic is so close to my heart that I can speak. I'll try to speak from my heart. I'll ask around maybe, what do you mean when you think of leadership? What are some of the things that come to your mind? What is leadership in your view? Anyone?
Someone that inspires others.
Inspiration? Okay. Anything else? Obviously, inspiration is absolutely number one. Okay. Leadership manifests in multitudinous ways. Technical, managerial, innovation, and then we get into some soft areas. Self-awareness, emotional intelligence, which arises because of self-awareness. And then the dimension of ethics. What is the right from the wrong? But not everything is out there in black and white. Everything is a shade of gray. So there could be a choice if I ask you a question that you are going in a train or a train trolley and there is a fork ahead and you have 5 people on the trolley. And if you go left, there is a problem with the tracks and all the 5 of you will die. On the right track when you go, there are 2 workers working on the right track. And if you go the right track, the 5 people who are with you, they will survive, but the 2 on the tracks will die. How do you make that choice? Right? These kinds of choices manifest themselves all the time. In the development world, in the real estate world, where there is no black and white, there is a gray. There is a gray because there is something at stake that you have personally with you. And then there is a stake of how your personal meets what you believe to be the other. Right? Leadership is about the reconciliation or eliminating the disparity between your private dimension and your public dimension. Right? There will be many leaders who have a public persona and a very different private persona. Very often, most of them are called politicians. Right? But truly remarkable leaders have a quality which balances and brings those 2 private and public dimensions together. So there is no disparity left. Leadership is about sacrifice. Okay? I'm going through these items because I think we'll tie it back into how education should actually work and why it is so important. To things that go to the heart of what you do, as what one does as a real estate professional. Leadership is about the willingness to lose it all for the sake of what you believe in. Right? For doing the right thing. Standing up for the weak. People who are vulnerable, not so fortunate. And then this whole idea of education, right? What comes first? Does leadership come first, or does education come first? We will look into this dimension in a little while. Okay. When it comes to education, thank you. What is this? The question is, what makes not just an ordinary professional, but what goes into making a professional who is a leader? And most of the traditional real estate education is formatted around technical skills, right? But the value chain is long. You have to have the technical skills. You need to put a building together. You need to be able to make sure that the system of a building that you're putting together actually works. If it doesn't work, so the base would be wrong. So when you make a building, you need design, you need economics. Most of us professionals are in this field because we like what is the material manifestation of an idea, which is a building. A building can look something that is crafted out of materiality, right? You put cement, steel, and everything together. That is a building. But the question is that really a building? Building doesn't start with the matter. Building starts with the idea that you have. The external is just a manifestation of idea. And if you think about the whole process of building, it comes from the conception of the design, the knowledge and awareness of what would work if I was in the shoes of the people who is going to be working in this environment. Okay? From how you utilize space, the quality of space, the quality of environment, the quality of how the layout is and the structure is put together. How does a building interact not just within the tray of the site it is put on, but how does that tray interact with the other different trays that are out there? So a building is part of an ecosystem, which is a neighborhood, and that neighborhood extends into a city, a combination of regional cities together, and then to nation, and then a group of nations. So the act of building is not just an isolated act devoid of any meaning to put basic elements together. It serves a bigger purpose. Just like in an ant colony, every ant is working knowing that I put something together. But the idea of what those group of ants can create, if you dig out an ant colony, you see there is an entire wonderful structure below this. So individual agents with a good intention, working coordinatedly, can create magic. And that's what real estate is about, the design aspect of it. Then there is the economics aspect of it. It's as a proficient developer or proficient investor, real estate is not that complicated. You can do a building analysis. Financial analysis is also not very complicated. We complicate things through our education process sometimes. But if you look at some of the wealthiest people in the world who live and breathe money, they have very, very simple ideas. And there are two principles of that. There is a third one which is added later on. The first two principles is, if you have, let's say, 100 million PI, what do you do with it? How would you think about it? You want to make it to the next billion, right? But the billion doesn't happen by itself. So you can do a complicated pro forma. I want to make a building, and then my pro forma which is 10 years long, and I do a discounted cash flow, calculate a net present value, and then I assess whether this project makes sense or not. But if you think about very traditional societies, people think of money in terms of two simple basic facts. What does the money yield on a day-to-day basis? If I have 100 riyal, I need to get some income. And that income should protect me from the effects of inflation. My first objective is to protect my principal, right? So I don't lose money. I can get at least what my inflation is. So with that simple idea, you always make an investment, mostly where at least you're getting compensated for the devaluation in the value of money because of inflation. And the second part of it is when there is growth, capital appreciation. Right? If you create a product which has a long-term significance and ultimately adds value to the structure and the ecosystem which it is a part of, there will be a capital appreciation. If you're not getting compensated for the loss in the value of money due to inflation, and you are not getting compensated for there is no capital appreciation, then you might as well take that $100, 100 riyals, and put it under the mattress, or maybe invest in the SILIC you have in Brazil, which is the risk-free government security. You do not need to take risks. Right? So, from that perspective, it's important to understand, before I go into that, the third part sometimes is real estate has this unique advantage in many countries around the world, which is the tax advantage, right? So if in certain countries, certainly in the United States, if I build a building, once the building is ready, I can depreciate the building. If it's a commercial building, over 39 years. If it is a residential building, I can depreciate it over 27 years. And the government says if your building has depreciated, you should get a tax benefit of that. So I can make a building where I have some tax gain in some other business, and I make this building just so that I don't have to pay taxes on my other business, because I can take a tax deduction. There are only three sources of value that you can create financially, right? So you get a little more complicated beyond this, beyond the decision making with respect to your own building. Then you get into things like your building has been created in a certain economic region, or maybe towards a certain national framework, and money is brought from somewhere else to develop that building. Then you get into questions like what would be the shift in the relative value of the money that was brought from outside into creating this building, and then how do you manage the risks? Most of these risks include the foreign exchange risk, right? So if somebody brings dollars to build a project in Sao Paulo, I would be worried about what will happen, how the foreign exchange rate is going to shift. So understanding economics and money is at the heart of common sense real estate. But our education system we teach time value of money. Everybody knows time value of money, right? You have money is worth less tomorrow than it is today, assuming there is inflation in the system. So you can discount the future money that you will get to today, and you get to a value of what is the value today of the money that you will get tomorrow, right? The question is that enough? Answer is no. And the best way to comprehend this analogy is if that means everybody in this room must have written a poetry in life, right? Has anyone written a poem in your life? Poetry? Who has written a poetry? Ever written a poetry? No? Not even you, Marcelo? Okay. You have? Okay. You have to think when you write poems or you read poems, a good poem that makes you very, feel very rich after that reading because it's an experience you have shared with a piece of paper. There are only 26 alphabets in the language English, right? And we have very simple 26 sounds that have. And from these 26 sounds, we have created this entire body of knowledge that we see around us. We have created the world's greatest music based on those 26 sounds. Because if you write lyrics, right? And of course, the do, re, mi, the sa, re, ga, ma, pa, as we say in India, those 8 letters has constructed all the music of the world. So it's extremely important to understand and go back to what those 8 are, what those 26 letters are. And what is the deeper meaning of those 26 letters? Did they arise by itself? They have a history, right? And if you get those 26 right, then you take it to the next level. Maybe you can write a word from those. Some choice of the 26 gives you a word, and then you start associating meaning with those words. And from that comes a sentence, from the sentence comes a paragraph, from the paragraph comes a chapter, from a chapter comes a book, right? And you have constructed so much knowledge based on those 26 characters. But even that is not enough. Because to write poetry, you have to disintegrate all the knowledge that is going into creating the prose or the non-fiction, the logical world. And you have to go back to the roots of the 26 letters. And in the way you are self-aware of your own self, your own emotions, what you want to create, what your intention is. And you go back and you combine with those 26 letters, and there rises poetry. A poetry is the manifestation of very simple things and your aspirations and your intention, right? And in the process, what you have done is you have deconstructed everything you have learned so far through the conditioning of knowledge, because words were crafted a certain way. Right? The same process applies to not just basic real estate. Everybody can do that. But to leadership in real estate, to be a leader, you have to deconstruct all your learning, or at least be aware of the limitations of our learning, and we all have limitations, bar none. And be willing to go back to the basics, understanding money, if you're interested in the economic or the finance dimension of real estate, understanding, how the time value of money works, which areas it works, where it does not work, why it doesn't work. Why was time of value of money constructed in the first place? Who came up with this equation? Right? Where did this equation of time value money come from? There are certain mathematical principles behind it. And then you start explorating, and then you start thinking, you know what? I made my analysis to develop this building, and I did a net present value analysis, and I concluded today that this investment makes sense or this investment does not make sense. Is there a problem with that? There is a problem with that. Even after getting all these things right through your education system, when you do a net present value or a discounted cash flow analysis, is everyone familiar with discounted cash flow? Yeah. Here is the problem. The problem is you made a decision today of how your project is going to evolve tomorrow over the next 8 years or 10 years. And you forecast your cash flows. There'll be construction period, leasing period, holding period, and you have a construction cash flows. And then you say, okay, this is the risk of my project. And then you discount it and you made a decision. The real world actually doesn't work like that. The real world works where you make a decision today. Next morning you wake up, you want to make a different decision. And the next morning you wake up and you want to make a different decision. Maybe you want to change the use patterns that you want to create. Maybe you want to phase out your project. Maybe you want to make the part of the project vertical, part of the
project low height. And maybe you want to see if I do this project until 5 years, and after 5 years I want to fundamentally change the uses of the place. So what I'm trying to say is there is a lot of uncertainty when you conceive something. And there is no way you can accurately capture the essence of in a net present value analysis, all those potential outcomes that are out there. And the question is it even possible to capture uncertainty? Right? In the body of knowledge in real estate, there is a tremendous potential. The answer is yes. You have to look at something called options theory. Are you familiar with options, people? Options? No? Option is every decision you make always comes with an option. So the option to change tomorrow, the option not to build and wait for 2 years to build, or option to change the use. If there are mathematical ways to capture the optionality associated with real life decision making, it's a powerful tool you have in your hand. And I will, based on experience, I'll say this. Yes, there is a way to measure uncertainty based on historical knowledge. And it is very logical, very mathematically possible. Right? So the point is not to restrict yourself to what is given. Simple things like time value of money can work in different contexts in very, very, very different ways. If you have a deflationary country or an inflationary country, the NPV analysis, if you do in a general way, will apply same to both. But in fact, one of those is going to be wrong. Okay. So, one of the most important things is design. You know, we are all taught to design, and some of us developers, we have the unique fortune of outsourcing design to architects. We go to them, we ask them, you know, put this building together for us and show us some options. And the architect comes back and says, you know, these are the 3 different ways you can use it. Your job as a developer is to you tell them this is how much square feet I want, because this is what my revenue is going to be, what my cost is going to be per square meter, and this is going to be my profit, and I can sell this at this implied yield, so I get to a valuation. Right? It's like a director having extreme faith in their actors to deliver by themselves. But if you're a conscious developer, at some part of you, aside from being a poet, also has to be a designer. And a designer is not who values functionality, but also values the interpretation of an idea. What that means, let's say, give an example, practical example. You are designing 2 buildings. You want a developer, you've hired 2 architects. One architect comes and gives you a nice glass curtain. The other architect comes and gives you bricks put together in interesting patterns. And the glass is also put in interesting patterns. It basically solves both the problems. But then as a developer, how do you think about it? If you're a conscientious developer, your aspiration is not only the building is a statement of your ego, your functionality, your profitability, but your objective is to craft a building which ultimately works with the rest of the historical location and the kind of an ecosystem you want to create or be a part of. Every small decision has an impact on the rest of the ecosystem. Do you want to go with the slab and the beam, the same kind of a structure? Or you want to be more creative? If you want to be more creative, you will incur more costs. That is the general expectation. Can you be creative without incurring more cost? And there are technologies out there now in building and design where, Frank Gehry, are familiar with Frank Gehry's work? Frank Gehry designed this building called 8 Spruce Street in New York City, which is a building which looks like, Bernini, the painter, the artist, the sculptor of Mother. He made the sculpture of Santa Maria. And Gehry took the idea of the building as he wanted to imbibe the same kind of spiritual effect into this building through the unfolding of the sheet that Santa Maria wears, right? And Michelangelo has also built sculpture with a lot of folds in it. But these folds are different. Michelangelo's folds are softer, and Bernini's folds are sharper. So they have a greater effect. When you look at a sculpture, it is more powerful. Just because the guy had an idea that I want to test and experiment with the shape of the folding of the clothing she's wearing. And then comes Frank Gehry, and he takes this idea and he tries to replicate in this building, which is the highest residential tower in New York City. And everybody thinks, you know what, the guy is crazy. He's going to build this. The cost is going to be 200% of what you expect. But what this guy does is he finds the technology. What he does is he goes to this French firm called Dassault Systems, which makes aircraft. And you know how aircraft design is. Everything has to be optimized, right? The shape, how do you extract value from putting together minimum materiality and also shaping the form in a way that is most efficient. And then filling the materials becomes secondary to the thought about the structure itself. So he takes this and he goes to Dassault Systems and he says, give me your software. And he uses that software to put together the entire glass cladding of 8 Spruce Street. And you know what the cost was? It was less, slightly less than you would have for the normal budget construction. So being creative, imaginative is something we don't want to lose in part of our education system. Leadership is about creativity and imagination. It's about taking risks. And if you have a faith in your idea to be able to say no, the greatest art one can learn in life, if it doesn't work for me, I have the strength to say, I don't want to do this. But it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of sensibility to say, you know what, I may not have something to eat, but I am going to create what I believe should be the highest quality aspiration of mine. And that aspiration can come in different forms. It can come on the choice of the site, the choice of the design, the architect, the different players. But none of those architects and the different players can relieve you of your own awareness and consciousness and your intention. Right? So when you do that, the building is no longer material. The building becomes an expression of your intent and if you're the highest spiritual aspiration that you have. And by spiritual, I don't mean religion. And those spiritual aspirations come from leadership qualities. The qualities to be able to, you know what, I can save some money here, but this is not the way, this is the way. Maybe I have to spend a little more, but this serves my client more. I'm going to provide this layout for my retail development or retail mall. And I have a choice. I can put together what is a traditional mall. There are stores and I'm going to make money. All good idea. But the problem is 20 other people are doing it in your neighborhood. So the question is, how do you think differently about things? One way is to say, you know what? This is not a building. Deny the materiality of it. And say, I plan to bring 25 retail clients in this. Every retail client has a business model. Let me try first to define what is the aspirational theme of this retail marketplace. And then let me understand the underlying business models of my customers. And then create the form that goes around the logic of that business model so it works for them rather than just for me. Right? So that idea that you have is not about you and financial returns alone. Same thing applies to economics. Right? You know, most of the problem in the world is because of macroeconomists. The two great wars killed fewer number of people than the macroeconomists of the world. You have big economic theories. People get paid all the time, big money. But nobody predicted the 2008, the debacle that happened in 2008. You know why? Because people became too rational. Everybody thought that mathematical principles, you know, the forecasting became devoid of common sense. When you are not getting money to be compensated for the loss of money that you would incur, you start justifying it through other means. Oh, I'll get it back in capital appreciation. Capital appreciation is what? Blue sky. You don't get it until you have done something to deserve to get it. So, for those of you who are starting out, and I'm sure means you are more experienced than most of my students. My students are fresh and young, and you know, you're also fresh and young. But what I can share as a teacher with them is a simple notion. You should be learning, be creative, and be innovative all the time. Challenge everything in the world that you see around you. Ask questions. You know, a conscious society questions its politicians, the industry structures, the business models, and you question yourself also. And that process allows you to at least attempt to give your best to the outcome that you have. Right? Creativity and imagination is not just creating a mall somewhere. I kept coming back to the idea of a mall. I don't know if any of you visited Japan, Tokyo. There is a big mixed-use development project in Tokyo called Roppongi Hills. Tokyo is basically larger Tokyo is 35 million people, one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world. And it's like a pancake. It is flat. In that flatness came a guy, his name was Minoru Mori. And he said, I want to build tall. People said, you're crazy. Tokyo has earthquakes. How can you build tall? So I said, okay, let me try. And by the way, he was crazy too. He was a professor, so he was crazy. It took him 17 years to acquire the land in Roppongi Hills, and he went piece by piece by piece to assemble the piece of land. It took him 17 years. And then, instead of putting just a mall together, what he does is, he says, you know, traditional business model is like I want to buy something, I go to a retail store, so I interact with the merchant of the retail store and I want to buy and get something. This is how malls have been traditionally working, at least in our conception throughout our professional lives. But he was the one who had this idea, even before Amazon.com or eBay, that the way business models in this world are shifting are more towards something called a network platform. Right? So if you go to eBay, eBay does the same thing, where you can buy and you can sell. You don't see the seller or you don't see the buyer. But the platform works as a mechanism to foster trust between the two transactional parties. And eBay is successful because the buyer knows that they will get the right product, and the seller knows that if the buyer buys, they will pay. All eBay does is make sure that happens. eBay doesn't bring its own products today. It's a marketplace. So you can make it, eBay is like two-way marketplace between two parties, buyer, seller. And then you look at an Amazon.com. Amazon.com is also a platform. But instead of one buyer and one seller, they have different kinds of buyers and different kinds of sellers and different other kinds of industries that have been put around this, where all transactioning on the marketplace. And Amazon's job is to make sure that the marketplace functions well. Right? And it is efficient. And Amazon controls who's going to behave how in that marketplace. So there is a governance element to that. A traditional retail mall doesn't consider governance. They say, we build this property, the tenants come in, they pay us their rent, and there is a property management and everything is all done. Good property management, very important. But can you craft a mall which works on the same principles as a multi-sided platform, like an Amazon, like an eBay, or like something else which has not even been conceived, where the operating system is being provided by the material things that you have put together? And you have the capacity to bring in different kinds of users into that. How the different participants in your marketplace work with each other? Do they have enough flexibility to be more innovative and creative? So you are transmitting through your design of the platform the innovation and creativity to those guys who are your customers. Imagine the power that you have contributed to this whole environment, this ecosystem. And then, how do you govern it? How do you manage it? How do you put the users together? Right? That becomes a corollary, a second act to the underlying economic logic of the platform that you're building. And this is a trend. If you look at businesses, most businesses that were linear businesses are probably going to have a very, very difficult time in the next 10, 15 years. Why is real estate any different? And the question is, why should real estate not respond in ways which are creative and imaginative and anticipate what is likely to happen in the shift in the way our clients use space? Do I need long-term leases which are static for 5 years or 6 or 10 years? Could I create a space where leases itself become transaction elements? Can you have a marketplace for the trading of leases? So by making the economic system and the design system and the real estate system and the urban system different, by challenging the fundamental notions of education that we have been taught, is the greatest contribution you will make. We only live for 80 years, 29,000 days. We are lucky age, we can live longer, we can live 100 years. Maybe I plan to live 200 years, so I don't know about you. But life is finite. And in finite life, every breath we take becomes very valuable, extremely valuable. Can you make every breath count in a way that is fun, is importantly making a difference, not just in the way our urban systems are constructed? And can we help those through whatever way we can, through money if we have money, through ideas if we have ideas, through teaching if we can share our knowledge? then the quality of life becomes very, very different. Your act when you are conceiving, picking up a pencil to draw a line on that building, to conceive that building, it comes alive. It's the most powerful thing, because what matters is the intention behind the pencil when you picked it up. In those 29,000 days, half of the time you're studying, and sometimes we are studying wrong things or things which we ultimately will have to deconstruct and get rid of. So that leaves only, 14,500 days, right? All of you should go home, take an Excel sheet, and see how much life has passed. You will be shaken to the core. The question then is, what is left? What do I make of it? In those moments you will realize what matters most is my deepest aspiration. It doesn't matter what is out there. When you spend time with yourself in solitude thinking about the product that you're going to create, the aspiration that comes to you in those moments are your purest aspirations. You may not have all the tools, you may not have the perfection of getting it absolutely right, but it doesn't matter. What matters is the quality of intention you had in those moments. And then sequence of intention, good intention, backed by skill. Every step you take will be powerful. Even you make a windowsill or just the detail of this dais, every detail will come alive because it's an act of your own creation. So attention to detail. Imagining the dais in different ways, right, is what makes a leader. Most of us pass our lives, which is okay to pass lives that way. You know, we eat and drink, we go home, make merry. You know, we have kids to raise. We do all the good things in life. But in the process, we forget ourselves. We forget our deepest aspirations, our deepest values, and our deepest contributions we want to make into the system, with our skills, what we have at our disposal. So going back to the place where it all starts within you, deep inside you, and acquire the skills, challenging in the path the skills that you acquire, and not being afraid of reimagining what needs to be done, is the most powerful thing you do. The world is changing. You know, the developed countries used to be very powerful. Economic growth in most developed countries is slowing down. They're very innovative still, very, very innovative. You know, the advances in robotics, artificial intelligence, in, genetics is going to propel, but the value add is going to be of a different kind, not the kind that we have had in the past. It has never been like that. It always, the rapid acceleration of new technology is going to increase. So in that context, most of the other work that needs to be done will probably be done by places where there is capacity for the factors of production, countries which have commodity rich, countries which are human resources rich. Brazil happens to be both. Countries who are, a lot of people who can manufacture well, people who are technologically very proficient. You see all this shift towards the traditional ways of doing business back over to those markets which are still emerging. And that has been the story. Now, how do you compete against those? My students at New York University and Columbia both, that's the fundamental question you have. If what I can do can be replaced by a robot, or an artificial intelligence problem can solve my structural issues, why the heck am I needed in this whole thing? And we all have to face that issue. It's not just that we are going to finite life. Now, the way we lived our finite life is also at stake. What do you do? In that context, your creativity comes into play, how you develop your skills. Your skills, in order to serve a job purpose, that has been the traditional model of education. All good, nothing wrong with it. But what will make you different going forward is the capacity to combine different skills together. And the more skills you combine together, the more intricate the network begins, and it is very difficult for anyone else to replicate. How can you combine those skills in a way that makes you absolutely unique? That, your intention, and a programmatic structure that allows you the combination of practice and theory. Theory is very, very important. But theory is not everything, especially when you see theory in the hands of macroeconomists. Or you see theory where it becomes extremely mathematical. The world is not mathematical. In fact, the world is not the way you see it. I come from India, so I'm a little crazy. But our philosophy in India says, I'm originally from India, I am American now, but our philosophy says what you see and hear is just an appearance. And it sounds crazy. It sounded crazy to me for a very, very long time. But if you do a thought experiment, a simple thought experiment, right? And it gives you the power of what uncertainty is in this world. And in that context, how to live your professional life. None of us in this room were alive 100 years ago, right? We did not exist. Somehow we got lucky and we became the victors of 17 million sperms. We became winners. And we are here. We were born. We came from nothing. 100 years from now, nobody in this room is going to be here. Life is finite. But everything appears the way it is. I want to pick up my morning coffee, I get to the store, I want my bread, my breakfast. Everything is in place. There is an order in the system. And the order appears continuous. Things appear real. But imagine that you were to take yourself out of this system and you were looking at the system from outside. And you somehow have the capacity to move time fast. Really, really fast. And you're looking into this system where all these people, all of us are. What will you see? You will see one bubble come, live 80, 90, 100 years, 200 years in my case, and then go away. And you're moving time fast. All you will see is a soup of bubbles coming and going and coming and going. The world appears like this because the way we are perceiving this world from our senses. If you take it outside, the world becomes like an ocean of probabilities. Things emerge through actions intended and unintended. And if you have that perspective, anything that emerges and goes away cannot really be real in all its context. This is a little philosophical, but it cannot be real in its context. It appears real. So the question is, everything you are creating is also going to be going through the process. You take a pencil, you create something and it exists, and at some point it will change. Everything is changing. How can you influence that little bit of a change is perhaps the most important thing when you know life is finite. And that is the purpose of education. If you design a building which cannot help someone improve their life, improve their thinking, give them the resources or give them the mental imagination to go out and do something better for themselves, your act of building is incomplete. It's only theory. You need to know how to put the thing together within the limitations of gravity, between the limitations of strength of different materials. But you also have to say, NPV doesn't work. Maybe there is an alternate way to do this. You need to say, if somebody has been building buildings in so many different basic simple structures, can I craft a building which looks like a crumpled piece of paper? Materiality, you impose materiality on yourself by thinking that we are all going to live infinitely. We acquire assets because those assets tell us, you know what? It helps you deny your own mortality. Acquisition of assets. Acquire ideas. Challenge ideas. And the more you say no to materiality, don't deny materiality, accept it, but don't chase it. Then every act will become a reflection of your deepest, best interest possible. And that is what the purpose of education is. It is not to help, it helps to get a job. All good. But also to live a complete, healthy life full of good intentions for yourself and for others around you. And how you do that? I think that capacity exists in all of us. That capacity exists if you thoughtfully design an education system. And then leadership is just a consequence of that education system. Nothing else. Thank you.